Hey, welcome everyone to this month's Intentional Success webinar. We're going to talk about the keys to managing a scalable live event business. Okay? This is all about, getting out of the weeds. So as managers, as owners, as key personnel, there's so many fields that we spend time in. There's so many places that we are being very tactical. I want you to pull back for a second and see how we run a scalable business and how it's different from what you're used to. Trust me, I think you're going to like it. I am, of course, Tom Stimson. I am president of the Stimson Group. I'm a business consultant that works exclusively in the live events industry. Companies like yours are my clients. I'll tell you more about those services if you're not familiar with them a little bit later. Of course, we are recording, and I will double check to prove it. Yes, indeed, the little red dot is accurate. So the recording will be available for you later on today. You'll get an email at the end of the day, let you know how to access it. We use the Q&A box to ask questions, but hey, use that chat and say hello to everybody. Let us know where you're calling in from today. Would love to hear about you. If you've got a need or a pressing need or question, post it on there. Maybe somebody can help you out. There's no fair game in the chat. But if you do have questions while I'm presenting, put them in the Q&A. I'll see them. I'll answer them at the appropriate time, and we'll leave plenty of time for additional Q&A. All right. Let's get to the fun stuff. So why am I doing this webinar? Why did this topic hit my marketing calendar? I'm still hearing a lot of conversation about downtime and waiting for downtime to get things done. And one of the benefits of scalability is that, downtime becomes an antiquated concept. Your core team is available to work all the time on the things that are important, which includes planning all the future jobs. So we're going to have a fresh look at what downtime actually is. I want to talk about the highest and best use of every employee. Having somebody who can do 27 jobs is awesome, but what's the job they should be doing? And just because somebody is the best at something doesn't mean they're the ones that should necessarily be doing it. And the point of being scalable is making time for the things that matter most, which is selling and planning and making sure that the company remains profitable. I know you're already good at execution. You're all good at doing shows. It's why we are here. I want to focus on the business of doing business and what that looks like. So we have been many times called the reactive industry, right? And because we're constantly putting out fires and we're good at it. We deal with emergencies. Oh, by the ways, we fix mistakes. That's life in show business, right? You make a plan, you hit the ballroom, and you get to the loading dock, and then the plan falls apart for all the things that are out of your control. But we're good at that. But if our plan is to be reactive and not figure things out in advance, and we go into reactive mode, companies like that never actually end up with downtime, right? Because when business is slow, when revenue drops, everybody's burned out. You've used up all of your people. They need a break, and you never really get to doing all those downtime projects. You end up using downtime for recovery time. Now, planners have downtime, but they don't have it in the big chunks, right? They use that so-called downtime to make sure that they are caught up on planning. It gives them more time to work on systems and processes and improving things for the future, but it's not to catch their breath, because they're always selling and planning future events. So let me talk through the different elements of this. The keys to managing a scalable live event business affect different aspects of your company. I'm going to start with the owner because this is the obvious one. It's the elephant in the room, right? I need for you to understand that the owner's job is to be the person your business needs. Now, having said all that, I know there are some things that you like to do and there's some things you don't like to do. Trust me, I hear about it all the time. I hate doing personnel reviews. Well, who doesn't, right? So we want to make sure that the owners are first focused on things that only owners can do, right? You're going to be stuck in the admin world of your business. There's no way out of it. I've seen people delegated. It doesn't turn out well. So owners will always need to focus on finances. They've got to look at their dashboard. They got to make sure that cash flow is provided for. Look at their forecasts. That's really, really important. Look at the profitability in the forecast, and keep track of confirmations of jobs that are coming down the pike. They need to know, they need to have their finger on the pulse of their business. And a simple dashboard will help you do that. Owners also have to have an annual cycle, which, it may have those awful performance and pay reviews that you've got to fit in, but you also need to be looking at those recurring overhead expenses that you tend to ignore. So those finance things are important. They don't take a ton of time, but they're not really optional. And an owner, like any manager, their primary job is to remove obstacles for other people. Okay. They can do this by making sure that the data and information that we're working with is good and accurate, that we have processes and procedures in place to get the work done that we regularly have to get done. And they need to apply some sort of standards and accountability to the performance of the business and the performance of the people in it, because this is your brand, right? You're selling yourself through your business, and it's going to reflect on you. So you've got to keep your finger on that. But having said that, most of my clients and most of the owners of the businesses that I work with are accidental entrepreneurs. They were good at something. They were a good technician and ended up with a company. They were good at selling shows. They ended up with a company, right? Maybe they thought it was a good investment. I don't know how they did that, but sometimes we find those folks. So most owners are in this business because there's something that they really like and want to do, and they don't want to give it up. I'm not fighting it anymore. I don't fight with owners over what they want to do. I just want to get it down to one primary tactical role. If you've got 10 or more employees, you can't be the sales guy and the show caller and the head of operations. You got to pick a lane. So if you're going to have a tactical role, and the bigger your company is, the harder it is to have this role, then it's got to be in selling, it's got to be in planning, it's got to be in execution. It might be an admin, but it typically doesn't happen, right? We can hire a controller. That's not the hard part. We can get somebody else to do HR. So if you're an accidental entrepreneur in the live event industry, you either sell, you plan, or you do shows. Pick one, right? Now, we can work around that, okay? If you're in the selling sphere, which of your skill sets are you going to use? In the selling sphere, we've got marketing, we've got pipeline development, we've got pricing, we got to close, we got to retain clients, we got to write proposals. What is your superpower? Where are you going to work? Where are you going to be effective? Because the selling sphere is a number of jobs. It's not just one job. Same thing in planning. Now, I used to call planning operations, but operations is a horrible term for what we do. What we do is planning. We schedule, we outsource, we prep, we maintain cost control. We look at the profitability and make sure that the jobs are going out as intended. We avoid scope creep. If you're the owner who's great at planning, great. What part of planning are you going to manage? Are you going to manage a group of people who are doing it, or one person who's doing procurement and you're doing the rest? It's up to you. Pick a lane. Execution. If you're the owner of a company and you've got more than 5 employees and you are touching a piece of equipment during the show, stop. You need to be the executive producer, the show director, the designer, the production manager. You need to be in a much more valuable position where the client doesn't see you doing any work. They see you making sure that the work gets done. So I want to get you out of that super tactical role of being a video director and let them see you hiring and managing the right video director. Okay. Now, as the owner, you're always going to own strategy. You're always going to own administration. We can't get away from that. But if you want a tactical job, pick it. Pick a lane, stick with it. Another thing that we need to focus on in a scalable business is marketing. I know I won't spend too much time on this because you're rolling your eyes, but we have to be marketing all the time. We need to improve the quality of the leads that is available to your team, which will improve the quality of the opportunities that you get to write proposals on, which will improve the quality of work that you get to do. There are 3 fronts in marketing, and they all require steady effort. This is not seasonal work. This is not, oh, we'll do it in our downtime. Marketing is huge, right? So you've got an organic marketing front. That's the part that kind of works without any extra effort. You set it up and it happens. When people say, oh, where does a new business come from? We get referrals, folks just find us. That's organic, right? To have effective marketing and rely on organic, you need an effective website and you need actionable and targeted calls to action to get that lead to engage with you. Now, ideally, we want to capture an email address so that we can do outreach marketing, which is leveraging our mailing list. Okay. You can use social media, but social media is designed to drive people back to your website so you can capture their email address so you can market to them directly, because you don't own social media. You have no control over who sees it. So if you get the chance of getting some eyeballs, we want to get them back to an environment where we are in charge, give them a compelling reason to join your mailing list, so that you can use outreach to get to them. So we're going from that organic passive to an active outreach campaign. And the third thing we need to do is human engagement. Business development is marketing. So you need to leverage your business development powers, whether that's an individual or a group of individuals, or send salespeople to events to develop leads, meet people, trigger opportunities, nurture existing clients, make introductions, get introduced. At the end of the day, we need human interaction. Yeah. Is it a relationship business? Sure. Relationships are super important, but nobody has a relationship with a mailing list. You've got to get humans involved. So make sure that you're putting effort on all three of your marketing fronts, because you need a steady supply of future business and future opportunities in order to justify the level of scalability that you build into your business. In other words, don't build a selling, planning, admin engine for a $5 million company and hope that you get $5 million worth of business. Build it for $1 million company that can handle $5 million of business. That is what scalability is all about. Marketing is major key in doing all of this. Now, this is not this is not a surprise to anyone. We might want to win some jobs, so we need to quote to win, but we also need to be profitable, right? If it's worth quoting, it is worth winning. Never quote something that you can shrug about winning. If you want to win it, do what it takes to win it. Now, you also have to maintain profitability, because winning isn't just about cutting price. It's about putting extra effort in there. But extra effort into an unqualified buyer is a waste of time. So in order to make sure that we are quoting profitably and winning jobs we want to win, we need to filter every opportunity before we move it forward. So an RFP is not a call to action. Just because somebody sends you an RFP doesn't mean you need to respond to it. You do need to have a conversation, but it doesn't mean you need to write a proposal. You've got to finish filtering. Is this an ideal customer? Is this an ideal project? If you don't know what an ideal customer or an ideal project is, you need to figure that out. That's an important conversation to be having. Do you know your costs? Spoiler alert, most of you don't. So if you don't know what your costs are, how are you going to price this effectively? So we need to start paying more attention to what our costs are so that we can apply the right margin. What? Margin is the profit we add on top of our cost. And margins vary, right? The season, the lead time, the risk, the competitive factors, the strategy. There's a whole lot of factors that affect the appropriate margin on any given quote or opportunity that you respond to. So filter these things, make sure you're asking the right questions before you move something forward, and be ready to turn stuff down, because you don't need non-ideal customers. Wouldn't be ideal, would it? So turning down non-ideal work is different than turning down non-ideal customers. Sometimes we can have an ideal customer that needs us to do something that's not the right thing. Now, there's also times when an ideal customer, or somebody who appears to be an ideal customer, comes to us and there's a deal breaker. Everything looks good, but you encounter circumstances that make you go, man, I really want this job, but I'm not sure I want this customer. That's a deal breaker, right? Typical deal breakers I see and I advise on all too frequently is one, bad faith negotiation, right? We see this where the customer says, I'm agreeing to this, and then they change the criteria of what they said they agreed to. That's bad faith negotiation. They agree to a price and then they back down on that price. They agree to a limitation of scope of work and then they renege on that. Okay. A bad faith negotiation might also be a cherry picking offer. If you present a proposal and they say, hey, yeah, I like this, this, and this, but you know what? I'm going to rent my own video projectors because I can get a better deal. That's cherry picking. That's not what you want in a customer, right? Unfair terms. Well, our procurement system says we pay you in 75 days. That's corporate policy. That's not a fair term. Ask them if they're saying, great, can I charge you 8% more? Right? That's an unfair term. Don't work with people who are not willing to pay you fairly and are making their internal processes your problem and making you their bank. Why does a giant corporation need you to be their bank? Right? Disrespect. This manifests in a lot of different ways. Not responding to emails, not meeting deadlines, maybe the way they treat your team. If you find yourself being disrespected, it's not going to get better, folks, right? Once you've taken on this client and you've overcome this, it's only going to get worse. That's not going to be ideal. That's a horrible thing to do to your team. Okay. And then the third thing that is a deal breaker, because you can have an ideal customer and you can have an ideal project and you can be completely out of smart capacity. You know that it would be unwise to take one more job at that particular time. And even if you outsourced it, you couldn't give the client the service and attention they deserve. That's running out of smart capacity. Now, scalable companies do have a lot of capacity, but there are limits. And one of the keys to scalability is actually knowing when and turning down work. And if you're not turning down work, okay, you have too much overhead, right? All right. Another concept in scalable businesses are the anchor positions. And you've heard me talk about this over the years about wearing too many hats, how we need to have people in anchor positions where we can't steal somebody to do delivery work when they should be planning deliveries, that sort of thing. These are your glue people. These are the people that hold everything together. If a salesperson's on show site being the show director, they're not selling. Okay. They've left their anchor position. They're not doing their job. It's going to affect your future work. It's not a good deal. Likewise, if your operations manager is out there being a production manager on job site, then we're not planning for future jobs, right? They have an anchor role. We need people to do that. You don't send your accountant out to run the house lights, right? So what are the roles that we have in our business? You need to sell. And we know that selling is marketing and is business development. It's design and technical direction to help with estimating, and it's the actual salesperson to develop the proposal and negotiate the close. Now, once we have a job, we've got to plan the job. How are we going to pull it off? And that's going to trigger some procurement. We're going to have to subrent equipment. We're going to have to hire outside labor. We may have to subcontract a piece of the job, get somebody else to do the breakout rooms, rent trucks, do logistics, do travel. The list goes on and on. But we can't procure until we've had planning. All of these roles, these spheres need anchor positions. You do this every single day. And even when you are slow, in other words, we're not doing shows this week, we are doing shows next week, the week after, or the month after, there's still planning and procurement to be done. Selling should never stop, right? When we borrow personnel from these roles to fill a show position, that is a short-sighted thinking. That's reactive thinking. Sure. Are you going to do it in an emergency? Yes. Do companies who plan well have emergencies? Not as many. Figure out how to make that a non-negotiable deal. Work harder at finding more resources so that you're not stealing from your core personnel. I already talked about downtime. There's no downtime. There's only time spent on improving processes and resources. So if I'm not selling, planning, and procuring, I'm making sure that the resources that I do that are getting better. I'm making sure that I have more supply chain to work with, developing a deeper bench, I'm reaching out to more customers and more prospects, doing more networking, right? You have to trust the system to work, but you do have to manage it. So as the owner, who's going to manage this for you? Remember, if you've chosen to be out there on the execution side of the business, you now need a general manager to make sure that your business keeps doing what it's supposed to do. Straightforward, simple? Of course not. That's why there's going to be questions. Don't forget to post your questions. All right. I mentioned growing your bench, and we do. We've got to keep growing our bench. When you stop growing your bench, that's when we get in trouble. When you get comfortable with a certain set of suppliers, I guarantee you that's when they're going to let you down. That's when you're going to have one too many jobs. That's when you're going to have a last minute job and you're going to find you have no more bench. And if you can't do last minute work, you're in the wrong industry, because a lot of our work is last minute, and some of it's ideal customers and some of it's ideal work. So your anchor team, planning and procurement, should be building a deeper bench. Okay? You need more resources, you need more places to get things, and you need to spread that work around. So a couple of tips here. You've got some great freelancers you want to work with, book them early as possible. Don't worry about jobs changing or canceling. You have enough confirmed, immovable business on your calendar to give them enough work that they will think you're their best customer, right? Look at your calendar. You're going to run out of gear, right? Somewhere, some jobs. If you're busy enough to book freelancers on a jobs, go ahead and book the sub rentals now. Don't worry about the gear that you might have left. You know what you're going to run out of. Tie some of that gear up, get that plan going. You might need to cancel it later, but chances are you won't, because you need to hold back some of your resources, whether it's people, equipment, tools, process, whatever it is, systems, so that when your best customer comes to you at the last moment in a busy month, you've got a way to say yes. When somebody has an emergency, you've got a person that you can tap to go replace them, and you're not going out into the freelance market where everybody's already busy and everybody who's left available are not people you want to use. You don't want to be shipping equipment across the country because you thought maybe that truck would get back in time to use that projector that was on it, right? Hold back some inside resources. Don't be afraid of doing some preemptive sub rentals. Okay. And if you're worried about assigning work for your tech staff and making sure that they're going to be busy in the future, you have too many full-time folks, right? Full-time workers get 40 hours every week. Yeah, you can shorten their hours in slow months. Great. What did that actually save you? Full-time workers, we pay full-time. On-demand workers might work 7 days a week, and sometimes, 1 or 2 weeks in a row, but then they don't work for a day or two or a week or two. You hire them on demand. You still treat them as payroll. You may even consider them part of your business family, and they get invited to the Christmas party. Then you have a freelance community of workers, right? They work for you during peak demand or when their specialty is required, but they'd like a Christmas card, but that's all they're really expecting, right? And then you have staffing companies that you reach out to, and you use them to fill in the gaps with general help and sometimes specialists. Depending on how busy you are, changes when you contact these people. If you're going to be super busy, get the staffing company lined up. Then get the freelancers lined up. Your on-demand workers come last. Your full-time workers come just before them. If you're going to be slow, book your full-time people. Use some on-demand if you have to. It's just common sense, right? But you need to have this depth, and you need to leverage all of these types of staffing pools in order to make your scalable model work. Now, forecasts become hugely important. And when I ask most owners about their forecast, I get a feeling, right? They say, well, I feel like, this fall's been a little bit light. We thought we weren't as busy as last year. Really? No kidding? Of course you aren't as busy as you were last year. Last year was nuts because we had pent up demand. We had revenge meetings. That was 2022. It's never going to happen again. So you had a normal fall. Great. What's the spring look like? Well, I don't know. Well, you need to know. You need to be looking at the indicators. You need to be watching your forecast, because your forecast is going to tell you how to balance insourcing and outsourcing. It's going to tell you how big your team really needs to be. So your fiscal budget is like a barometer, right? If you're scalable, this means you can budget for worst case revenue. And I'll give you a great example. I had a client who had a fantastic 2022, as many of you did, broke all of their records. You know, they did 18, $19 million worth of business. They'd done 12 the year prior. They put together their budget for 23, looked at their forecast, looked at the recurring revenue, eliminated the windfall jobs that weren't going to come back, and thought, ooh, wow, we're probably going to have a $13 million year instead of an $18 million year. That's a big drop. Okay, great. What did that do to the bottom line? Well, this is a scalable company. It didn't change their overhead. There was no technicians that were going to be underutilized. Okay. They were still profitable. Were they as profitable? Not in gross numbers because their revenue was smaller, but as a percentage of revenue, they only dropped a couple percentage points. Right. And so I said, what's the worst case scenario? So we dropped it down to 11 million. They were still making money. They didn't start losing money until they got to 9 million. That's a scalable business. Okay. Don't hire beyond your base needs. Don't conflate windfall jobs with revenue. It's a windfall. Okay. You can hold back your key personnel like I talked about. How many jobs deep can you go before committing key personnel onto something? So if you've got some technical folks or production managers on staff, how long can you hold them back before you have to commit to them? Okay. And then if you're looking at your forecast, you can start to leverage your expected margins. If you expect to be at capacity, increase your margins. Every job you quote, put a higher margin in there. One, you got nothing to lose because you're going to be at capacity. And two, you should, because your risk is going to increase. Right? So your fiscal budget, being able to look backwards is great. That's what your P&L does. It looks backwards. You need a budget that helps you look forwards so that you can look at the revenue that you expect for each given month and see that how that will affect your future P&L so you can make business decisions now. Every business should do this, but scalable companies do this because it helps them keep their overhead at the right level. I see your question, John. I want to get to that at the end. That's a great one. Keep the questions coming. All right. I'm going to sound like a broken record here. Sell from cost, not from retail. I'm going to get deeper into this in next month's webinar. I'm going to lay down the law on what we should be doing for pricing. Okay. Selling from cost is never wrong, but you do have to actually know what your costs are. What, Tom? Replacement cost? Of course it's replacement cost. And if you look at your replacement cost for anything and you can find your replacement cost, you can add the appropriate margin to it. I look at tons of P&Ls. I look at a lot of companies, and let me tell you, low labor rates are the #1 cause of low profit in live event production companies. You need to get real about what talent is worth. If you're keeping your labor rates low because it keeps your equipment margins high, you are losing money that you could make. Okay. I can show you, I got detailed spreadsheets that will show you what happens when you raise your labor rates and increase your discounts to lower the equipment price and what that actually does to your profitability. It will amaze you. Get real about what labor is worth. Charge more for labor. You're charging too much for equipment. And heck, you made the price up anyway, right? So the point of owning equipment is the huge margin over replacement costs, which means you can afford to discount more because your risk is lower, right? The risk on equipment is now surprisingly low. Back when I was a kid and doing shows, our equipment risk was huge, but our equipment margins were way bigger than anything you've ever seen. We bought a new video projector and paid for it in 2 weeks, right? But the chances of that video projector failing and costing thousands of dollars to fix or weeks and weeks to wait for parts from Belgium was extremely high. So we had to have twice as many video projectors as we needed because we always had to send backups. That's risk, but you know what? We had the margins to go with it. Your equipment's not like that now. Okay? You have different risks. It's mostly in labor. Higher risk is higher margin. Every cost category in a quote has its own margin. There is not one margin that fits all things. Metrics. I don't know if there's any accountants or bookkeepers on there, but there's a few business owners. When you're looking at your financials and at the end of the month, you're looking at how August was. Right now, you should have a clear picture of how August turned out. I'll be honest with you, I don't care about August. I know what your August looked like. It sucked. Everybody's August sucked, right? What I care about is how did August affect your trailing 12 months revenue? Looking at things month to month goes, shrug, we lost money. We knew we'd lost money. You don't do anything. If I run a report that shows me, August through July, that's an entire year, and I compare that to July through June, and I saw my gross profit drop significantly, that meant August was horrible. What did I do in August that I need to stop? Where's the problem? Was it revenue? Of course it was revenue. Was it overhead? Yes. So if you have more overhead than your slowest months can handle, you have too much overhead. That's why we call it overhead. It's a burden. It's going to eat your lunch. So look at your financials, review your trailing 12 months P&L every single month. Look at how last month affected your trailing 12-month gross profit. That's the first thing I would look at. Okay. Check your overhead. Is it tracking with revenue? Right? You can have a slow month. Your overhead doesn't really change, but are you upside down? Right? Look at some KPIs. Look at your labor revenue, everything that you charge for labor across all areas, and everything that you charge for equipment across all areas net of discount. What's the ratio between the two? If your ratio, if your company is, your sell is 30% labor, 60% equipment, and 10% other, I'm going to bet right now that you're not making any money. You're making 2% net profit if you are lucky. It could be worse than that. If you are a full service production rental company and you do corporate meetings, association meetings, ballroom shows, full service audio, video, lighting, your labor revenue to equipment revenue should be about the same. You might be 45% equipment, 45% labor, 10% other. That's healthy. You might be 50% labor and 40% equipment, which would be even better. Now, that's revenue analysis. Now let's look at cost of sold. Take that total labor number of revenue and compare that to your total labor cost for all direct labor. That includes the people on staff that you have hiding down there in overhead who are really show people. Get them up there in cost of goods sold where they belong. If you have a 30 to 50% ratio of labor to equipment, I'm going to bet good money that your labor cost will exceed your labor revenue. I see it all the time. I show it to owners and they're shocked because they're not looking at this. Now, they sometimes look at some other things. They go, oh, our travel revenue and our travel costs were the same. Well, we don't really mark up travel. That seems normal. Hogwash. Don't do that. Travel is a profit center. You're managing a complex, valuable service for your customers. You should make money on it. Same thing with logistics. I very often see logistics costs exceed logistics revenue. Oh, we can't charge the client for that. Quit telling them you're charging for that. You need to have that revenue allocated because it does affect your profitability, right? And then when you've done all of that, do some sample job costs. Pick a couple of jobs, small and large. Make sure that you know what's going on in them. Job cost is not the be all and end all. It's not the thing to run your business by. You just want to get a better understanding of how did your numbers turn out, because you might have one job that skewed all the numbers. And now we can look at that one job because we may not have a systemic problem. We have a job problem. How did this job get sold this way? Did we over deliver? Did we undersell? Did we overspend? Okay. That may explain everything that's abnormal in your new trailing 12-month report. Okay. And then when you get out of all this meeting, this is, this is an hour a month, right? you're going to have an action list of things that you need to do. We need to tighten up this labor pricing. I need to go talk to the labor desk and say, hey, who are we booking? We need to book different people. There's all sorts of things. Maybe we need to buy some new equipment. Okay, maybe we need to find a different supplier for sub rentals. You're going to have action items that you're going to take because of the things that you learned. All right, some conclusions, and get those questions fired up for me here. Look, you have cost of goods sold subsidies built into your personnel. If you have project managers that help in the sale and then they go out and do shows, okay, half of their time is sales and half of their time is direct expense. Okay, get at least half of them into direct expense. They're not all overhead. Likewise, you have other people in your company who really are there to do shows, but we treat them like they're operations because they're not on shows all the time. Make sure that they show up in cost of goods sold. Any technical work, whether they are working on a show or not, belongs into a cost of goods sold. Okay, you only have them on staff because you hope for them to be billable. Therefore, they should always be treated as billable. And you'll have a better understanding of how effective you are at being efficient at utilization. So reduce those subsidies that you have in personnel that try to make your job costs look better, right? Get the people who are in that should be in cost of goods sold that are down on overhead, get them moved up. Now, rely on your fiscal budget. Okay, you need to model future results. If you see trends, if you see something that's going on, okay, run the model, plug in the numbers, see what it does. Do I need to make changes now? Sometimes it's great news. You know, sometimes like, hey, we got a big show, we need to hire more people. Well, no, according to the budget, we don't. Maybe we need to book some important freelancers, maybe spend a little bit more money and get a better TD for this job. So we make sure that job goes well so that we don't have to run out and hire people. Senior management, keep them engaged in the selling, planning, and procurement, right? That's your team. These are the guys that have been with you for the years, the gals that have been with you for years. Keep them involved in the things where you make money. Okay, show execute. Senior management shouldn't be out doing shows, with the exception of the owner, if that's your chosen tactic. Okay, you paying these people, you know, good salaries to make sure the business runs well. That's selling, that's planning, that's procurement, right? Get the owner in the role they want and backfill from there. Let's quit playing a game with what is the owner going to do. The owner needs to decide so that we can build the right company around them. It's for their benefit. Lower your revenue expectations and raise gross profit goals. Revenue is not the be all and end all. I would hate for you to say, hey, I'm going to have a great year next year. We need to hire up some people. We need to buy some new gear and have that not pan out. That would be silly. Now, trust me, I did that for 10 years in the 90s because we were growing 50% a year. Part of that was the era. Part of it was I was in a growing business. But if you can't guarantee that growth, I mean, don't hire ahead of growth. Build a scalable business that will handle those windfall years when they come. So when I'm budgeting, I like to use not worst case scenario revenue numbers. I want to use likely case. Okay. We'd be happy with case, not we'd be thrilled with, not ecstatic. Just this is probably what's going to happen, and that's good enough. That's a great number to budget from. I would also drop it down a little bit and make sure that if things don't go as planned, you have a worst case scenario. But that's the only two versions of the budget I actually need. Now, I do want to always be raising my profit goals, right? If your cost of goods sold or your gross profit for this trailing 12 months is 43%, well, what have I got to do to get it to 45%? Right? And that's not an insignificant increase when you're averaging it out over the year. So if you're going to go ahead and put in 5% gross profit in your budget for next year, you better know what you're going to change in order to make that happen, because it's not magic. It doesn't happen because we try and keep down costs. It happens because you do something to keep down costs or increase revenue without increasing costs. And let's just forget about downtime, right? Let's just get that word out of our vocabulary. It's a Band-Aid. It's a promise we're not going to keep. Oh, we'll worry about that during our downtime. No, That's not running a business. That's hope. That's being reactive. That's like walking into the ballroom with a truckload of gear and no plan. We'll figure it out when we get in there. It's all going to change anyway. That's what downtime is. Don't use that crutch. You're in the show business. Plan a fantastic show and work on shows year round, because there's always jobs that need to be worked on. All right. Got a couple questions coming. I'm going to get to them. Give me some more. We got some time left. Let me give you a couple of things to think about here. Jumpstart Workshop, November 9th in Dallas. We've had a price rollback because our sponsors have stepped up and they want as many people as possible to be able to attend. Evolve has joined us. We're upping our reception for the evening, getting a better bar, nicer food, but we're going to have a great day. And we are back to the super early bird price that I announced last month. That's still in effect. Please take advantage of it. Bring your team. It doesn't have to be all the management team. I've got warehouse managers. I've got salespeople. There's all sorts of folks coming because there's stuff for everyone to learn. Check out the landing page and look at the breakout sessions, look at the presenters. There's a lot of value here. You need to get on board and need to get on board quick before we run out of seats. Podcast. Yeah, check it out. Please subscribe it. Whatever platform you listen to, please subscribe. Please rate it. Please comment. If you've got ideas for a podcast, send them my way. I would love to hear them. And yeah, what can I do for you, right? The entry-level conversation that I'm having with owners right now is often about peer groups. I want to help you get outside your bubble. We're having great success in our peer groups with owners who need to hear perspectives from other folks, hear how they're doing things. We mingle that in with the stuff that I teach. It's a way for me to coach many people at one time. Probably it's the most cost-effective thing I can do for folks, but the ROI is huge. So I'm going to be talking more about that for the rest of the year because we are starting some new peer groups starting on January 1. So pay attention to that. One of the groups I'm going to start is a second command peer group. I've traditionally done owners groups. I've had a lot of requests for second in command, general managers, key personnel, longtime employee, whatever it is. They need to learn how to do their jobs better and how to be the next leader of that business. So we're going to form a group about that. If you're interested or feel you might be a candidate, just shoot me an email. I'll give you a little bit of the background and tell you more about when we're going to get started with that. Of course, I do one-on-one coaching with owners. So we can set that up. There is some coaching in peer groups, but if you need more than that, that's what a lot of my clients have me do. I talk to folks almost every single day about whatever's going on in their business at that time. I do assessments, particularly in larger companies where you've got a lot of moving parts. You want to make sure you're doing the right thing. Assessment is a great way to start. We'll figure out what the right solution is afterwards. It might be a change management project, which is that, that deep engagement. Is that it's Tom being on full-on consulting mode and working with your entire organization to help you get where you want to be faster. That's my world. Let's talk, reach out anytime. Happy to see how any of that might apply to you. Next month, very excited. We're going to talk about selling from cost. Selling from cost is profitably honest, and you need to make this switch now. I can't wait to do this. I'm also going to talk about this in depth at the Jumpstart Workshop. So if this is interesting to you, do sign up. It's a breakout room that I am personally going to deliver because it is near and dear to my heart. So getting out of the weeds. Running a scalable business is less stress because every person in your company is going to work at their highest and best use, right? We don't need somebody who's making $50 an hour to go prep a job that somebody that's making $25 an hour could do. That is not their highest and best use. Scalable businesses solve for that problem. We're going to eliminate redundancies in process and personnel that will actually allow things to move through your system much more efficiently and consistently. Instead of having 5 project managers that each have their own way of getting a job ready, we have one system and process, and we hand completed jobs to project managers. That's eliminating redundancies. It's very powerful. It's very good for the bottom line. It's very good for your stress levels, right? And the numbers will tell you if you're getting it right, and they will also tell you what you did wrong. I can tell you what to do about it. So if you got some questions, now's the time to talk about them. I'm going to unclick the share here so you can see more of me, which is like your wildest dream, right? All right, questions. I'll start with John's question. Please further explain the difference between on-demand workers and freelancers. So, during the pandemic, we had to let a lot of people go. We furloughed them. We maybe didn't have enough work to bring them back, but we kept them on payroll. For many of you, an on-demand worker is somebody who's on your payroll, but they're part-time, right? You only hire them when you need them. This is very common in most businesses. If you look at everybody in retail or the restaurant business, they're all demand. They get a schedule. They're told when to show up. So you have people who are valuable to you that you want to keep on payroll, but you just book them when you need to. You were doing this with your technicians before. However, when you didn't have work for them, they came into the shop and prepped shows or did QC or probably stood around and talked on their phones or stared at each other. But on demand are people that you would consider part of your employee team, but they don't work every single day. Freelancers are independent workers who work for lots of different companies. They are professionals that sell their time and services to people. I was a freelance technician for many years. That's where I came from. And we work for a lot of different folks, and you're only as good as your last job. So that's the big difference between the two. Alex asks, should labor billing cover freelance labor and staff costs? Of course, absolutely, because your replacement cost is whatever the higher of the two is. And this may shock you. I have worked with companies where their staff cost was higher than their freelance cost. And when the commission sales team found out, they started selling freelancers on all their jobs because they made a higher commission than if they sold staff people because the internal cost was too high. So labor billing, whatever you charge for labor is based on your replacement cost, which is your highest likely cost, the number you will most likely incur if you have to outsource or insource if you're upside down. So that number applies. It doesn't matter whether you use inside or outside labor to it, you sell at the same price. So your cost is replacement cost. You add margin onto that. Some days I get to book staff and maybe they're less expensive. Other days I book a freelancer and it's above my replacement cost, but I've still got some margin in there. At the end of the day, you'll always make money on labor, and you will probably make money a lot more consistently that way. Thank you for asking that. Okay, Kate asked about audit seats for Jumpstart. You mentioned before that the content is meant for teams of a certain size, but I'm a team of 3. Good. Bring 1, bring 3. Come on. Whoever needs to be there needs to be there. Kate, book a call with me. I'll talk about your team. I'll help you understand where you're at, and I'll make my best recommendation. I don't need you to bring people that won't benefit from it. But you sound like you'd benefit from it. So at the very least, come by yourself. There's the challenge is that there are 9 breakout sessions in 3 rounds, and you won't be able to attend all the breakout sessions. We'll figure out how to share all that information for you, but don't discount what you're going to learn and the things that are important for you. Doing good on time here. Got a couple more questions. Thank you, everybody. Hang on, let me catch up here. All right. So Mike says that recent trends have given us a great opportunity to adjust pricing. Do you see the pendulum swing back the other way soon? Any advice on adjusting pricing upwards during those times? So we're in a service business. We're not milk or eggs. So we're not a commodity. So prices don't roll back, right? There's really no reason. Now you may get more pushback from certain customers, which you will deal with on a case-by-case basis. But that doesn't mean that you need to sacrifice your margins. You just need to make sure you're tailoring your scope of work to their needs. So trying to adjust price upwards, my best advice for you on that is quit thinking you have a price. Treat each job independently, add the appropriate margin for the timing. Don't let your clients think that there is a fixed price for everything and that they can rely on it, that there are things that affect what the price will be, such as location, timing, fit and finish, that sort of thing. Make sure that they understand the variables that will affect that. And now you're not locked into pricing. Okay. Margin is what the market will bear. Okay. And the supply demand curve, there's a point in time where you make your price or your margin too high and demand will drop off. That may be fine because you have all the business you want at a high margin. But if you look for more business, sometimes we have to lower our margin to make room for more business, right? So leverage that supply demand curve. There's not a perfect spot. There's probably a best spot for your business. Thank you. A great question, a deep question. Oh, okay, Alex, clarification. Total labor billing annually is to cover freelance. Absolutely. So everything that you bill for in labor, your total labor number, whether you used freelance or on demand or staffing companies or staff, you sold X amount of labor. You spent money on X amount of direct labor. Those are the two numbers that I want to compare and make sure that all my revenue is covering all of my expense plus profit. Labor is a profit center. Figure out what your profit is. I bet it needs to improve. Thanks again for the question. Okay. Let me move this over here where I can see it better. All right. Great questions this week. Thank you guys. Do I win the first job I concede in the month? My forecast is looking a little thin and I want to put some jobs in there. Is it worth lowering my margin to make sure I have January work? Okay. That's a good question. It's kind of an it depends question. Is it a strategic customer? Is it a best fit job? Are you sure what your costs are? Can you achieve the margin that you want to achieve? Do you really need to lower the margin to win the job, or are you just feeling insecure? Reconcile those things. Now, if it's a truly competitive bid and you are trying to win that job, look at the opportunities for a multi-year commitment for a reduced price, in which case now you can sharpen your pencil. But you don't sharpen your pencil until you know what your costs are, you know what your minimal margin needs to be, you can write a tight scope of work, and it's somebody you want to do business with. And if you can get a multi-year commitment, that's worth sharpening the pencil a little bit more. Hope that answered the questions. Bob asks, I need to raise my labor rates, but my sales team is pushing back hard. How about that? What are other owners doing? I can tell you what my peer group and coaching clients are doing because we talk about this fairly regularly. Again, look at your total labor revenue to direct labor costs. Look at the ratio of labor to equipment. Make sure that you're moving in the right direction there. But then have an honest look at what your bench is costing you, okay? The short answer is quit thinking like a rental company. I actually had this conversation with an owner this week. Their pricing was good, compared to a lot of companies, but their costs were also high because they hire a pretty high level quality freelancer and they're only making about 20 points on labor. Now, the customer never sees their individual labor pricings, and the customers never see how their equipment is priced. So they could easily raise their labor rates, and if they needed to, charge less for equipment and charge the client the same thing as last year and probably make more money in the long run. So you need to know the data. You need to have the data in order to make that decision. But sales teams are going to push back because they're advocating for the client. You need to advocate for your business. And math doesn't lie. Here's what our costs are. Here's what our margins should be. And if you have trouble closing a deal, either I need a better salesperson or you need to use your closing tools better. One of which is if you're selling from retail price minus discount, then maybe you need a deeper discount on equipment so that you can get the right number on labor. That will make your revenue more scalable. All right, one more question. We struggle to find good freelancers. Where are they? Great. Come to Jumpstart. There's a breakout session on recruiting professionals. My friend Nancy is going to give it. The short answer is that good freelancers come to you by word of mouth, but it goes both ways. You may get a referral to a good freelancer from somebody that you already work with, but freelancers talk to each other. Good freelancers are hard to find because they don't want to be found by companies they don't want to work for. So be the company they want to work for. Now, part of this may be how much time and energy you have in your planning and procurement team to work on developing people and recruiting people and deepen that bench. And you may have some bad habits that have you going back to the same people all the time. So you're never seeing other freelancers. You're never having work for other freelancers. Even if you do find somebody who will work for you one time, you never call them again. That's part of the problem. Make sure you're spreading the love around. All right, folks, this has been fantastic. I thank everybody for being here, making time. This is fun. It's exciting, and it's a very great time to be in our industry, and it's a great time to figure out how to make more money and have more fun doing it and have a lot less stress. And that's what scalability is all about. So thanks for joining me today. We'll get the archive recording up for you later. And I'll see you November 9th in Dallas at Jumpstart. Be good.